there! What would you make with a package of wood chips? Of course, you can burn them down and make delicious smoked meat or fish with them, but I have a better idea for you. If you're new here, my name is Irene and today I'll show you some super easy and yet high-looking DIY decor projects using wooden chips. So, let's go crafting! For all of today's projects, I've used one package of Weber Whisky oak wood chips. Actually, you can use any brand of wood chips. The main thing here is to choose a large size. I will leave the links for possible options in the description box. For the first project, you will also need burlap or any other fabric of a dark natural color. I'm cutting ribbons about 2 inches wide from a sugar burlap bag. You will also need a wreath base. Here I have a foam wreath, but you can use any wreath base you have on hand or even make it yourself out of pool noodles, for example. You can actually use any base as you're gonna wrap it in fabric. The fabric here is needed to hold the chips well on the base, as hot glue on the fabric provides the most secure hold. So I'm wrapping the base tightly in burlap and hot gluing the ends. Next, I'll come in with wooden chips. First, I'm selecting the largest pieces and hot gluing them to the wreath, distributing the chips more or less evenly over the entire surface. I'm doing this to have chips of different sizes all over the wreath. And I'm attaching them at one end only, so that the chips kind of stand on the surface of the wreath. After that, I'm attaching the smaller chips, also making them stand on one end on the base so that they stick out like the horns of a hedgehog. Here I tried to choose narrower chips, looking more like sticks or at least close to that. And I hot glued the larger chips at the very bottom of the wreath. Almost all the chips have an oblique cut at the end, so if you attach them upright, they will be inclined, and depending on the angle of the cut, they will stand more or less vertically. I tried to arrange the chips leaning in one direction and sticking out to the right and to the left from the middle of the base ring, that is closer to the outer edge. I've directed them outwards and closer to the inner edge inwards. The result is a beautiful pattern that reminds me of corals. I've seen driftwood wreaths in the same design, and these chips on the wreath arranged like so make a very similar style, something coastal. So I've decided to decorate the wreath with a starfish. You can also add shells here. And we're good to go! I absolutely love how this turned out. This wooden texture makes me think of sea and coast, as I said, although if you decorate the wreath with fairy lights, red berries and coniferous twigs, you will get a stylish Christmas wreath. But I think the coastal style suits it the best. For the next project, you're gonna need a white flat photo frame. I didn't have a plain frame, so I decided to use an old IKEA frame in retro design, and I'm filling the crevices in the middle with styrofoam strips. I've cut them from a piece of foam molding and have cut them to size to fit exactly into the crevices. After that, I'm painting the frame dark brown. Here you can use any darker color like gray or black, as we opt for a dark base. After that, I'm going to fill the frame with wooden chips. As you remember, for the wreath I chose long and thin chips, like sticks, but here you want to pick wide and flat ones, having rectangular or square shapes. I'm arranging them onto the frame like a kind of mosaic tiles to fill the entire surface of the frame without large gaps in between. And I'm using hot glue to attach them to place. Make sure the chips are equally spaced apart. The best thing is that you can cut the chips with wire cuts a little to fit into place. This makes it so much easier. As you can see, the chips have texture, and I'm arranging all of them with wood fibers going the same direction. And in the corners, I'm changing the direction of the chips, so I'll end up having all the pieces arranged with the fibers going in parallel to the sides of the frame. But that's me. You can also make it randomly for a more interesting and textured look. This whole process is so fun, calming and relaxing, and I definitely think you could spend a whole evening trying to perfect your design, but I think they are quite fun, a little bit imperfect. That last chip was so satisfying to put into place. After the entire surface of the frame is covered with pieces of wood, I'm also covering the edges of the frame to make the look more finished. Here I'm picking narrow flat chips. By the way, they are also very easy to adjust to size with wire cutters. The chips looked like real mosaics, so after some thinking, I've decided to give it a try and grout it. I had only grey grout on hand, so this is what I used, although I think white grout would look better here. I also think sealing the chips first would make it easier to clean them after the grouting, but this was a pure experiment, so I didn't do this. Honestly, I cannot decide which variant is better, with or without grouting. I'll show you both. Please let me know what you think. I'm so pleased with how this turned out. The frame actually completely exceeded my expectations. It looks like a real high-end piece which you can find at Pottery Barn or Anthropologie. Yeah, actually I think this is really Anthropologie in style. And the third project for today is making bookends. Here you will also need a base. I'm using foam eggs, but you can actually DIY them as well, for example out of foil. To make the eggs stand up, I'm cutting off the bottoms with a box knife. After that, I'm painting the eggs dark brown, just as I did with the photo frame. After that, I'll pick the chips I'm gonna need for this. I'll be making bookends with pineapples. I found a picture of similar ones made of driftwood on Pinterest. They are sold out, so I don't know where they're from. It was just a picture and I fell in love with them, and I just had to DIY them for me. So what I need is the chips for making pineapple leaves, and so I'm picking long and pointed ones as well as all kinds of irregularly shaped chips to cover the fruits themselves. After I've picked the chips, I'll start to turn the eggs into pineapples. First, I'm making the tops. To do this, I'm hot gluing long pointed chips vertically onto the egg tops to make something similar to bunches of leaves. You can make these tops more fluffy or very short. I like to have them thicker, so I'm making bigger bundles. I'm attaching the longest chips to the center, then closer to the edges I'm adding those that are lower and wider, and then I'm hot gluing the smallest ones into the gaps in between so that the bundle looks dense and the base is not seen through anywhere. After the top bundles of leaves are ready, I begin covering the base. For the first row, I'm using the smallest chips of the most beautiful shapes I found, and I'm hiding the place of attachment of the top bundle under them, as I don't want hot glue to be visible anywhere. After that, I'm attaching the second row. Here I'm making a shift already, placing the chips like scales, and I'm attaching the chips on the lower edge only to make them stick out like scales on a pine cone. At this point, it's time to remember that the chips often have oblique cuts, and it's very convenient to hot glue them standing on this oblique edge so that they fit snugly and nicely to the base. I'm attaching the third row, making a shift again, trying to ensure that the scales of the next row are located at the joints of the scales of the previous row. So, in general, I'm placing all the chips like tiles or fish scales. For the upper part of the pineapples, I'm picking up medium-sized pieces, and also I'm picking the chips that have uneven edges and not just straight cuts. Well, at least trying to use most of the chips of this shape. So you have to take your time to pick the right chips, but I promise you the result will definitely please you. Starting from about the middle, I began to pick larger pieces for scales. Yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm making both pineapples at once so that it won't happen that I use up all of the chips of the right size and shape for the first pineapple and have nothing left for the second one. I'm finishing the pineapples with the largest chips, and due to the shape of the base at the very bottom, the chips sit almost parallel to the table surface. This covers the base just perfectly, so the finished pineapples look very nice and neat, and you would never think that they are made from wooden chips for a barbecue. Next, I'll make the actual bookends. My hub has cut several pieces from a wooden board for me. This is birch wood, they are quite thick and heavy and will hold books well. I'm assembling the parts together at right angles using wood glue. If you would rather not cut anything, you can also assemble the bookends out of tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, just gluing several blocks together. After drying, I have kind of wooden brackets, and I'm staining them with a water-based stain in oak to fit the color of the chips. And the last thing to do is to hot glue the pineapples onto the bookends. I have to say, it's amazing. I love the way the chip-covered pineapples look. The shape just goes so well for showing off the chip's texture, and they actually look like an item from a high-end store. I think this is going to be one of my favorite projects ever. Hope you liked today's project. Please let me know what you think of them down below. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in my next video. Bye!